A few months ago, I decided to check out a video game from my local library to play over spring break. To my deepest regret, I chose Captain America Super Soldier. Watch the review on my channel, subscribe to my videos. However, one of the games that caught my eye on that fateful day was a game called Jaws Ultimate Predator, and since I piqued my own interest, I ended up returning to the library to lay those demons to rest. What really strikes me as interesting about this game is that you actually play as Jaws, and when I found that out, I had a brief moment when I thought that this game was going to be awesome. I mean, has there ever been a game where you get to play as a shark mindlessly hunting down and munching on people and other marine life? That should be impossible to screw up, right? Right? The game is pretty much what you'd expect from a game where you play as a giant shark. You swim around a huge underwater environment, munching on nearby fish and divers, etc. Things take a turn for the silly fairly quickly, though. You press the A button to bite enemies, and you press the B button to swing your tail. What's bizarre is that you can use 3-button combinations of A and B to perform a wide variety of combo moves. It's so surreal watching Jaws karate fight animals underwater. Seriously, watch some of this gameplay footage and tell me that's not exactly what's going on here. Jaws is karate fighting other sharks underwater. This game's going to be really stupid, isn't it? The combat is pretty straightforward, but it's straightforward to a fault. None of the enemies in the game have particularly special attacks that you need particular tactics or combos to defeat. You start the game with a tail whip combo that attacks in a wide area, and spamming this attack will get you through pretty much the entire game. If you browse through the upgrades menu, the game tells you that certain attacks work better against certain enemies, but I think the problem is that none of the enemies in the game are strong enough to where you need specialized attacks to defeat them. And this problem doesn't get fixed if you crank up the game's difficulty setting, because the game doesn't have any difficulty settings. Hunting down and killing enemies is fun at first, but as the game goes on it sinks into repetition as you realize that you can use the same basic attacks and the same simplistic tactics to kill any enemy that crosses your path, and once you know that, combat requires minimal effort. Hell, watching Jaws perform his underwater martial arts, or fish fu if you will, even that loses its novelty after a while. The game does have boss battles, but in one of the biggest cop-outs I've ever seen, every single boss fight in the game is a series of quick-time events. You see a giant-ass aquatic monster come out to fight Jaws, you get excited for an epic boss fight, and then the game starts a series of quick-time events and the boss dies as part of a cinematic. What a rip-off! And the quick-time events suck! You have to swing the remote and nunchuck really hard for the game to register your remote movements for the quick-time events, the first symptom of a poorly programmed game. The game's first several levels are tutorials for the game's assorted controls and mechanics. You hold Z to swim forward and you use the control stick to steer. It takes some getting used to, but this works pretty well. If you press the minus button, Jaws will lock onto the nearest enemy. When you're locked onto an enemy, the game removes your ability to steer Jaws up or down. You can only move Jaws left or right in relation to the enemy that you're locked onto. That doesn't sound awful, but here's where that bites this game in the ass. When you kill an enemy and the game no longer has you locked onto an enemy, your controls lock up. The game is so poorly coded that exiting lock-on mode locks up your controls so that you can't turn for a few seconds. Every single time that you lock onto an enemy, this happens. The game is also very picky about when it will let you lock onto an enemy. You have to be staring directly at the enemy, and the enemy has to be in very close range, or else the lock-on mode doesn't work. If you sneak up on an enemy, you can press the A and B buttons to perform a stealth attack. A meter appears on the side of the screen and you press A and B when the bar crosses the red section of the meter. You can perform a stealth attack if the enemy can see you, but the AI of the divers is not that good, so if a diver spots you, you just have to wander away for a few seconds, circle around behind him, and then you can stealth attack him. I like how the diver sees a giant killer shark swimming towards him, usually just having eaten another diver, then the shark goes away for a few seconds and the diver shrugs it off and goes back to what he was doing. But do you want to know what's really bizarre? You can stealth attack boats, too. If you succeed, Jaws leaps out of the water and lands on the ship, which smashes the ship completely in half and sinks it immediately. Do you know how hard it is not to laugh the first time that you see that? I don't even think that the Hulk could pull that off. And while we're on the topic of enemies, what kinds of enemies would you expect to fight in a Jaws game? Let's see, you fight other sharks, barracudas, eels, divers, robots! Yes, you fight giant robots in this game. You're actually watching Jaws fight a massive armored exoskeleton with nothing but his teeth. Who was smoking what when they made this game? You press the 2 button to pause the game, which is bad because the 2 button is awkwardly out of reach from the way that you normally hold a Wii remote. Most games use the plus button to pause the game, but in this game the plus button activates Shark Sense. Shark Sense makes the screen turn green, it highlights enemies and bonus items on your radar, and it highlights enemies and breakable items on the screen. In other words, Jaws has Batman's detective vision. So this game is dumb and silly, there's no doubt about it, but between Jaws' underwater karate fighting and his ability to casually shatter the laws of physics, this game was actually pretty fun to play just because it was so stupid that it was hilarious. But as time went on, my opinion on this game began to sour. Every damn level in this game looks exactly the same, ocean floors and water. There are a few levels where you're inside a structure of some kind, but even still, everything in every level is blue. Almost all the levels look and feel the same. And yeah, I know that I'm underwater and of course everything is going to be blue. I'm not an idiot. My point is that there's no sense of progression at all because every level feels identical. The game also has several problems with its basic gameplay. Your controls lock up when you exit lock-on mode, but that's not the only problem. The game's camera zooms in so close to Jaws during the regular game that you have almost no peripheral vision. You can't see anything that's to the side of Jaws. Seriously, if this camera was any closer to Jaws, it'd be lodged up his ass! You also have zero control over the game's camera. There's nothing that you can do to improve your vision. If you want to look somewhere other than what's directly ahead of you, you have to turn Jaws to face and move in the direction you want, which you can't do in lock-on mode because the camera turns to face the enemy. Look at this pandemonium! I can't see what the hell I'm doing, and I can't move the camera so that I can see what I'm doing. But probably the biggest problem with this game, the game doesn't have any physics engine known to mankind. If you hit a wall, you get stuck, the camera goes apeshit, and you have to fidget around desperately until Jaws gets unstuck from the wall and you can swim away. Quite a few of the levels have very tight enclosed areas, and when you mix together cramped areas, a crappy physics engine, and an awful camera that you can't control, you get a perfect storm that makes the game nearly unplayable. Just look at this crap right here. You wouldn't think that swimming through a small hallway would be such a trying task, but I grazed a wall and now I'm stuck in purgatory. Come on! Oh my God! I've never seen anything like this in a game in my life. What the hell is wrong with this stupid game? Why can't I turn to face the damn door? I swear to God, I am not doing this on purpose. Move, goddammit! Finally. It doesn't help that a lot of the levels are dark and corridors have a tendency to deform into utter blackness. When the corridors dissolve into complete blackness, you end up swimming into a wall so that you get stuck again. Oh, and sometimes the game forces you to sneak around squids that for some reason drain most of your health if you cross their vision. They put these squids in tight areas where you have to hug floors or other surfaces to avoid them, and that results in getting stuck in a wall too! Piling on top of the game's dreadful navigation is the game's abysmal draw distance. You can barely see anything beyond your face. Because the game's draw distance is so bad, the game puts a little objective marker on your minimap to guide you through the levels. The problem is that the marker points straight toward your next objective, whether there's a wall in your way or not. It doesn't guide you through the level, it just gives you a vague general direction to head towards. It is confusing as hell, and you'll end up backtracking through levels because you can't figure out where you're supposed to go to progress. You know what the first thing I did was when I started up this game? I swam to the top of the level to see Jaws' fin poking up over the top of the water, like sharks always do. It was then that I found out that if you get too close to the top of the level, the surface of the water blocks your view of Jaws. You can't see anything if you go near the top of the level, and you need to go to near the top of the level to attack the dozens of boats! What were they thinking? All of these problems, abysmal navigation, horrible camera, non-existent physics engine, these problems pile up to make the game incredibly frustrating to play. They're also all problems that could have easily been picked up in playtesting. Then again, playtesting would have required spending money on playtesters, and you can tell that this game's budget was somewhere around $10. So the gameplay is bad. Really, really bad. But what about the game's story? Yes, there actually is a story to this game beyond Jaws goes places and eats people. The story of the game revolves around the evil CEO of a marine activism company who's conducting nefarious experiments on fish. This pisses off Jaws, and being Jaws, he goes out to get himself some revenge. That's literally all that I was able to understand about the game's plot. The game's story is told through these incredibly cheap cutscenes, and most of the cutscenes are just people yelling at the evil fat man because Jaws is destroying all of his stuff. The game's cutscenes don't tell you anything. Why is the evil fat man experimenting on fish? What is the evil fat man doing to the fish that's so evil? I don't know! The closest thing to an explanation that the game gives you is that the evil fat man wants to build a utopia, but the game never explains what the guy's utopia is, what his utopia will do, or how fiddling around with fish will create his utopia, or even what he's doing to the fish to create the utopia. The game explains nothing! The utopia crap isn't even mentioned until almost the end of the game. Up until then, you don't even have an inkling of the evil fat guy's plans or motivations. You spend the entire game not knowing what you're doing or what your objectives are. You swim around eating people and smashing up ships, and you have no idea why. You want to know how awful the game's storytelling is? Near the end of the game, you finish a level and swim off into the distance like normal, and then, with zero explanation, the game immediately cuts to a cutscene of Jaws stuck in the evil fat man's lab. Zero explanation, zero transition. I didn't edit this footage. This is seriously what happens. Jaws gets captured by the evil fat guy off screen. The game doesn't have any narrative structure. It's frustrating because you know that the game is trying to tell a story, but you have no idea what the story is because it's told so poorly. And don't bother checking Wikipedia or GameFAQs to read about the game's story because I already did. This game doesn't have its own Wikipedia page and the GameFAQs entry is almost completely blank. I understand that you can't give Jaws an inner monologue because that would be too stupid even for this game, but you have to give us something! Tell the story through the eyes of the good marine biologist who gets sucked into the evil fat man's plans. Have him narrate what Jaws is doing and what he's intending to do. Finding a way to tell your crappy story should not be the hardest part of making a game. It's telling a story that isn't crappy that's problematic. Another problem that I'm having with modern games, Jaws Ultimate Predator is too damn easy. Up until the game's last few levels, I only came close to dying once, and that was because I didn't realize the enemies were respawning infinitely and I wasn't paying attention to my health. The only reason why the last few levels are difficult is because the game starts forcing you to fight swarms of enemies without taking a break. And even these fights aren't that bad if you remember to run away and find some health when you're running low. What the hell is that? Objective, defeat the plesiosaurs? What? Plesiosaur is a dinosaur. What in the... Where did they get that? I'm sorry. I don't know what to say to that. What could I possibly say to that? Jaws is a series of horror movies about a killer shark hunting and killing increasingly stupid people. How in the hell did we go from that to a killer shark fighting genetically enhanced dinosaurs? Is Universal trying to cross Jaws over with Jurassic Park and make some weird-ass Avengers game? It makes no sense! And again, the genetically enhanced dinosaurs are never explained. Just boom, out of nowhere you're fighting dinosaurs. Why and how did the evil fat man make dinosaurs? The game doesn't even attempt to explain it. You can't do that! Explain yourself, damn it! Explain! And on top of all that, after I beat the game, I checked the Wii's message board to see how long I'd spent playing the game. Counting the time that I spent wandering around levels trying to figure out where to go because the game's crappy map left me stranded and lost, and including 5 minutes to use the bathroom, it took me 3 hours and 2 minutes to beat this game. That is inexcusable! I don't know if I'm delusional, but I thought that this game had a lot of potential. What other game do you get to play as a shark swimming around and eating things? I think that this game could have been great, but between the repetitive combat, numerous glaring basic game design flaws, complete lack of challenge, nearly complete lack of story, and inexcusably short length, this game just falls flat at every turn. It is pretty funny to see how completely bizarre the game is, but that novelty isn't enough to make this game worth buying. I checked online after I finished the game. This game doesn't have its own Wikipedia page, IGN doesn't have anything about the game other than some screenshots, Metacritic has 0 reviews posted for this game, and GameFAQs has 1 review. Apparently I'm the only idiot that was stupid enough to play this game, and it should stay that way. Do not play Jaws Ultimate Predator. It sucks!